There comes a moment in every person's life when a simple question rises inside them like a quiet fire. Where did I come from? What is my story? What is the truth that was hidden from me? For countless Black people around the world, that question has echoed for generations. And every time someone got close to the answer, the pages of that answer were torn away, locked up, mislabeled, or banned. But here is the truth I want you to hear today. Nothing stays buried forever. No matter how many books were removed, no matter how many stories were silenced, the truth has a way of resurfacing, because truth is stronger than fear, and history is stronger than the hands that try to suppress it. The so-called banned books that connect Black people to ancient kingdoms, forgotten civilizations, and extraordinary intellectual and spiritual traditions are not just words on paper. They are reminders of who you were before the world tried to tell you who you should be. There were books that described maps older than the borders we know today, maps that traced the movements of early kingdoms across the Nile Valley, West Africa, and the African highlands. Books that documented scholars, queens, warriors, doctors, mathematicians, and astronomers long before modern institutions existed. Books that explained how cities like Timbuktu were centers of global learning, where thousands of manuscripts lay hidden in desert libraries while the rest of the world was still struggling to read and write. Books that revealed the lineage of people whose brilliance was so inconvenient to colonial narratives that silencing them became a strategy. But every time a book is banned, the question becomes, what were they so afraid of? And the answer is this: they feared the moment you would discover yourself. You see, when people are disconnected from their history, they become easier to control. They become unsure. They become confused about their purpose, their value, their identity. But when a person understands their roots, when they discover the stories that were removed from their education, something incredible happens. Their confidence rises, their voice strengthens, their mind sharpens, their sense of dignity becomes unshakable. That is why so many books about African civilizations, ancient Black cultures, and pre-colonial knowledge systems were removed from mainstream history, not because they lacked truth, but because they held too much of it. But listen closely. Your story did not vanish. It is alive in traditions passed down through families even when no one could read aloud. It is carried in rhythms, languages, symbols, and proverbs that survived voyages, borders, and centuries of struggle. It is reflected in scientific and cultural contributions that the world uses today without recognizing their originators. It is preserved in manuscripts hidden under sands, stored in private libraries, carried in oral traditions, and recovered by modern scholars. And most importantly, it is carried within you because lineage is not only written in books, it is written in memory and culture and in the human spirit. The greatest tragedy is not that these books were banned. The greatest tragedy would be if you never realized the power they hold, or the power you hold because of the stories inside them. When you discover the truth, you stop believing the lies about your limitation. You stop measuring your worth by what someone else wrote about you. You stop accepting narratives that shrink your identity. Instead, you begin to rise because you finally understand that greatness isn't something you go out and find. It's something you inherit, something you activate, something you awaken, and the awakening begins with knowledge. Think about the generations before you, strong people who built families, nations, and futures with far fewer resources than you have today. People who expanded empires, developed complex languages, created medicine, traded across continents, designed architecture that still puzzles modern engineers. People who studied the stars without telescopes, calculated distances without computers, and organized societies with systems so advanced they're still being studied. Imagine what kind of mind it takes to do that. Imagine the brilliance that must flow through the lineage of those people. And if that brilliance was powerful enough to build civilizations, imagine what it can do inside you today. The world doesn't fear people who don't know themselves. The world fears people who do. And that is why so many pages were removed, because those pages carried a mirror big enough to show you the truth. A truth that says you were never meant to walk this world doubting your power. You were never meant to believe you were less capable, less intelligent, or less deserving. You were never meant to shrink yourself to fit someone else's story. You were created with potential woven into your DNA, legacy carved into your ancestry, and strength reinforced through everything your people have survived. But knowing this isn't enough. You have a responsibility. You must reclaim what was hidden, seek what was erased, and rebuild what was broken. You have to study, research, ask questions, and demand answers. Don't accept surface-level explanations. Don't settle for simple stories. Dive into history. Explore anthropology. Look at ancient maps. Read recovered manuscripts. Listen to scholars. Examine cultures. Unlock languages. Connect the dots. Because every piece of knowledge you gain builds another layer of confidence, another layer of clarity, another layer of identity. And as you learn, something powerful will happen inside you. You will stop feeling like you're wandering through life without direction. Because people who know their lineage know their purpose. People who understand their heritage understand their mission. People who see themselves in the achievements of their ancestors walk differently. They stop living small. They stop hiding their talents. They stop apologizing for their intelligence. They stop fearing what the world thinks of them. Instead, they begin to live boldly, courageously, intentionally, because they know that greatness is their inheritance. You are part of that story. You are living evidence of resilience, innovation, strength, and brilliance. Your existence alone is proof that every attempt to erase your history failed. And now the responsibility rests on your shoulders, not to just read these stories, but to continue to write new chapters, to build new futures, to create breakthroughs that generations after you will study, to leave a legacy that no one can ban, hide, or rewrite. You must become the author of the next volume of this lineage. And what does that require? It requires discipline. It requires curiosity. It requires courage. But above all, it requires belief. Belief that you are worthy of knowing the truth about yourself. Belief that you are capable of extraordinary achievement. Belief that your lineage is not ordinary but exceptional. Because belief is what turns information into transformation. Belief is what takes history and converts it into destiny. Belief is what makes a person unstoppable. So hear me clearly, you are not lost. You are not forgotten. You are not disconnected from greatness. The world simply hid the evidence, but the connection was always there. And today, you have the opportunity to reclaim it, to rise beyond the limits placed on you, to step into the identity that was once denied, to embrace the truth that you come from a people whose impact shaped continents, whose knowledge shaped civilizations, whose resilience shaped history. And when you embrace this truth, when you walk with the confidence of someone connected to something ancient and powerful, the world will know, the world will feel the shift. And you will become a reminder that no matter how many books were banned, no matter how many stories were hidden, nothing can erase the lineage of a people destined for greatness. You become the living continuation of everything they tried to silence. You become the proof. You become the legacy. So rise, learn, discover, question, grow, and never again let anyone convince you that your story began at the lowest chapter. You come from a lineage so powerful that people tried to hide it, and now it is your turn to bring it back to life. Let the truth fuel you. Let the knowledge strengthen you. Let the rediscovered history elevate you. Because the greatest story ever written about you was never the one they tried to ban. It is the one you are about to write now. What they tried to hide is exactly what will set you free. Because the truth they buried was never meant to stay buried. It was meant to rise again the moment someone like you began searching for something deeper than the stories you were handed. When people attempt to hide history, silence knowledge, or erase origins, it is never random and never harmless. It is always intentional. They hide what is powerful. They bury what is valuable. They suppress what can transform the mind of anyone who discovers it. And when you begin to understand that, you also begin to understand yourself in a new way. You realize that the chapters removed from your education were the chapters filled with power. Power that would have given you clarity, dignity, and confidence long before the world ever tried to convince you that you were less than what you truly are. The books that were hidden were not simply old pages filled with ancient stories. They were mirrors. Mirrors that could reflect the brilliance of your ancestors. Mirrors that could show you the depth of a lineage capable of shaping civilizations, creating scientific breakthroughs, and producing leaders long before the world recognized the concept of leadership. These books carried knowledge that didn't just challenge the lies, they shattered them. They revealed truths that would make you stand taller, think bigger, dream bolder. And for the people who benefited from your confusion, your silence, or your doubt, that was too dangerous. Because a person who knows their true history becomes a person who cannot be controlled. A person who understands their roots becomes someone impossible to mislead. A person who recognizes the greatness of their lineage becomes someone capable of rising beyond every limitation placed on them. The truth they hid would have taught you that you were never meant to walk this world feeling disconnected or incomplete. It would have shown you that your identity did not begin in struggle. It began in strength. That your story did not start in loss, it started in abundance. That your ancestors were thinkers, builders, innovators, philosophers, travelers, and creators who shaped the world in ways history books rarely acknowledge. And once you know that, something inside you shifts. You stop living cautiously. You stop dimming your light. You stop apologizing for your ambition. Because you finally understand that the force driving you is not random. It is inherent. It is a spirit of people who survived everything meant to erase them. People whose brilliance was so undeniable that even when their stories were hidden, the impact of their work still shapes the world today. The truth they buried would have connected you to empires built from vision and discipline. It would have shown you that knowledge wasn't something new to your people, it was a legacy guarded in libraries, spoken in proverbs, written in symbols, preserved in oral traditions, carried across deserts, passed through generations. They concealed these truths because they feared the moment you would discover that you are not a descendant of weakness, but a descendant of greatness. They feared the moment you would realize you don't need permission to rise. They feared the moment you would understand that opportunity is not given to you, it is already inside you waiting to be awakened. But now the hidden is being uncovered, and as you learn more, you begin to see how powerful knowledge really is. It's not just information, it's liberation. Knowledge breaks mental chains, it breaks generational patterns, it breaks false identities. The truth that was hidden has the ability to pull you out of self-doubt and push you into self-mastery. And that is why it will set you free. Because freedom is not just the absence of restriction, it is the presence of understanding. Understanding who you are, where you come from, and what you are capable of becoming. When you gain that understanding, the world can no longer define you. Labels can no longer limit you. Opinions can no longer weaken you. You become centered, grounded, aligned with your purpose. What they tried to hide becomes the very thing that lifts you. It becomes your fuel, your clarity, your foundation. It becomes the proof that you were never meant to live in the shadows of someone else's narrative. You were meant to stand in the light of your own truth. And when you do, you begin to see yourself with new eyes. You begin to recognize the strength in your bloodline, the intelligence in your DNA, the courage in your spirit. You begin to feel connected to something bigger than your circumstances, something older than your doubts, something deeper than the challenges you face. And once you taste that truth, even a little bit, you can never go back to living small. You cannot return to the version of yourself that believed everything they taught you. You cannot remain trapped in the limits someone else designed for you. Because truth stretches you, elevates you, transforms you. It forces you to grow into the person you were always meant to become. That is why they hid it, and that is why you must uncover it. Because the day you decide to seek knowledge for yourself is the day your freedom begins. The day you start questioning what you were told is the day your identity becomes your own. The day you embrace the truth they tried to erase is the day you stop being shaped by the world and start shaping the world instead. Your lineage didn't begin in chains, it began in greatness. And the moment you understand that truth, your entire view of yourself begins to shift. For too long, the world tried to compress the story of Black people into a single chapter. A chapter filled with struggle, oppression, and pain, while ignoring the vast library of brilliance that came before it. They taught you about the suffering, but they didn't teach you about the civilizations that existed long before any chains were forged. They talked about captivity, but they remained silent about the kingdoms that mastered architecture, astronomy, mathematics, medicine, navigation, language, and governance before many modern nations even existed. They focused on the hardships because they knew that if you ever connected with the full story, if you ever realized that your origin was rooted in genius, resilience, leadership, and innovation, you would rise with a confidence that could not be controlled. Your lineage is older than the borders of today's world. It stretches across deserts, valleys, rivers, and mountains that witnessed the rise of civilizations more advanced than the world was prepared to acknowledge. You come from people who built structures aligned with the stars, people who mapped the heavens without telescopes, who created medicinal practices studied even today, who developed trade networks connecting continents, and who constructed cities so sophisticated that explorers couldn't comprehend how they were formed. You come from the thinkers who cataloged knowledge in scrolls, the builders who carved symbols that still hold meaning, the travelers who crossed oceans guided only by memory and skill. You come from a heritage too vast to fit into any single history book, too powerful to be erased by the attempts to rewrite the past. The world avoided teaching you these stories for a reason, because once you realize your lineage is rooted in greatness, you stop accepting the limitations placed on you. You stop believing that your potential has a ceiling. You stop letting society define your worth. You begin to understand that your existence is part of a legacy forged in brilliance, not brokenness. This understanding transforms your mindset. It gives you a different posture, a different energy, a different belief in what you can achieve. When you know your bloodline is filled with innovators and leaders, you stop questioning whether success is possible for you. You begin to see success as your rightful inheritance, something encoded in your DNA, something flowing through you even when you aren't fully aware of it. For generations, people tried to reduce your story because a diminished identity is easier to manipulate. If you believe your history starts in chains, you might spend your life trying to prove that you deserve freedom. But when you understand that your story begins with greatness, freedom becomes your natural state. You no longer seek validation because you already know your value. You no longer chase acceptance because you already understand your origin. You no longer operate from insecurity because you stand firmly on the foundation of a heritage that was powerful long before anyone tried to erase it. Your ancestors were not defined by suffering, they were defined by strength. They endured suffering, yes, but they did not begin there. Their beginnings were rooted in mastery, intelligence, and unity. They passed down languages that survived across oceans, rhythms that carried memories, wisdom disguised in proverbs, and values embedded in community. They built systems of leadership that balanced power with responsibility, economies based on cooperation, and cultures that valued knowledge as a sacred inheritance. These truths are not just historical facts, they are reminders of what is possible for you to, because the same brilliance that fueled ancient civilizations is the same brilliance that still lives within you. When you recognize this, you begin to understand that your dreams are not impossible, they are reflections of your lineage. Your ambition is not a coincidence, it is a continuation of those who came before you. Your desire for growth, progress, and achievement is not random. It is the echo of your ancestors calling you to rise higher than the world expects. And when you feel that pull within you, it is not pressure, it is purpose. It is the reminder that you were never meant to live a small life. You were never meant to shrink yourself for anyone's comfort. You were meant to build, create, lead, inspire, and elevate, just as those before you did. This is why reconnecting with your lineage matters, because when you don't know your origin, you walk through life unsure of your destination. When you don't know your foundation, you become vulnerable to whatever narrative is placed in front of you. But when you understand the truth that your lineage is rooted in greatness, you become unshakable. You begin to move with clarity. You begin to operate with confidence. You begin to act with purpose. And the world around you begins to shift, because you are no longer living according to the script that was handed to you. You are living according to the legacy that was born within you. Your lineage did not begin in chains. Chains were simply an interruption, not the origin. They were a dark chapter, not the first page. The story began long before the storm, long before the struggle, long before the world tried to distort your identity. And the story continues with you, because you are the proof that greatness survives. You are the evidence that identity cannot be erased. You are the continuation of a legacy that the world tried to hide but could never destroy. So walk boldly, stand tall, carry yourself with the dignity of someone whose roots run deep and strong. Let your journey honor the brilliance of your ancestry. Let your achievements reflect the power in your spirit. And let your life become the living declaration that no matter what the world tried to make you believe, your lineage began in greatness, and greatness is exactly what you were born to continue. When you reclaim your story, You reclaim your power because your story is not just a collection of events, it is the blueprint of your identity. The world has always understood that if you control someone's story, you control the way they see themselves. And if you control the way they see themselves, you control the limits they place on their own potential. That is why so many narratives about Black people were rewritten, distorted, shortened, or completely erased. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a strategy designed to make entire generations forget the depth of their legacy. But the moment you begin to reclaim the truth, the moment you search for your real origins, the moment you step away from the stories designed to shrink you, everything changes. You begin to see the world through a different lens, and more importantly, you begin to see yourself with new clarity. Reclaiming your story isn't just about reading old books or studying forgotten history. It is about piecing together the truth that was hidden from you. It is about recognizing that the story you were told may not reflect the story you belong to. When you reclaim your story, you take back the authority to define who you are. You take back the right to determine your own values, your own vision, your own mission. And most of all, you take back the confidence that comes from knowing your roots reach farther and deeper than anything the world tried to teach you. For too long, many people carried a narrative that began in struggle, as if their identity started with hardship and helplessness. But the real beginning is rooted in brilliance, strength, creativity, resilience, and leadership. When you reclaim that truth, you rise differently. There is a reason powerful nations, ancient empires, and influential institutions throughout history invested so much effort in controlling story. They knew that stories shape belief. Belief shapes behavior. Behavior shapes destiny. If a person believes they come from weakness, they will move like someone who expects failure. If they believe their history begins in limitation, they will live as if ceilings are natural. But when a person discovers that their origins are rooted in greatness, when they learn that their ancestors built civilizations, mastered knowledge systems, explored continents, created languages, and shaped the world in ways history books barely acknowledge, they begin to move with a power that cannot be faked. Their entire mindset transforms, their expectations rise, their confidence strengthens, their future opens. Reclaiming your story means refusing to let someone else's version become the truth you live by. It means unlearning the lies, questioning the narratives, and seeking knowledge that empowers rather than diminishes you. It means diving into your history with curiosity instead of fear. It means recognizing that your identity was never meant to be defined by the lowest moments of your lineage. Your story begins before the chains, before the forced migrations, before the oppression. It begins with excellence, innovation, and mastery. These are not just historical facts. They are the roots of your identity. And when you reconnect with those roots, you gain a foundation so strong that nothing can shake it. When you reclaim your story, you reclaim your voice. You stop speaking from a place of doubt and start speaking from a place of truth. You stop living defensively and start living intentionally. You begin to understand that your potential is not something you have to earn. It is something you inherit. Every dream you have, every vision you carry, every ambition that keeps you awake at night is connected to the strength of your lineage. Your story fuels your purpose. Your story reminds you that greatness is not foreign to you, it is familiar. You are not trying to become something new, you are remembering something ancient. You are reconnecting with the brilliance that has always belonged to you. When you reclaim your story, you reclaim the strength of your ancestors who survived what others could not, who built what others could not imagine, who preserved knowledge even when the world tried to destroy it. You reclaim the creativity that shaped cultures, music, language, and art that influenced the entire world. You reclaim the resilience that carried your people through storms with dignity. You reclaim the intelligence that built scientific, agricultural, architectural, and philosophical systems long before anyone admitted their origins. That power lives in you whether you realize it or not. And when you reclaim your story, you unlock that power. This is why knowledge is liberation. Not just any knowledge, but the right knowledge. Knowledge that reveals your true identity. not the manufactured one. Knowledge that expands your vision instead of shrinking it. Knowledge that reminds you that greatness is not something you chase, it is something you return to. When you tap into the truth, you begin to understand that you are not disconnected from your past. You are a continuation of it. You carry the strength of those before you. You carry the intellect, the creativity, the courage, and the spirit of those who refuse to be erased. Reclaiming your story empowers you to build a future that honors your history instead of repeating old cycles. It pushes you to aim higher, dream bigger, and push further because you now understand that your life is part of a much larger narrative. Your achievements are not just for you, they are for the generations before you, who were denied the chance to show the world their full brilliance, and for the generations after you who will stand on your shoulder. When you reclaim your story, you stop living like someone who is trying to prove they belong. You start living like someone who knows they do. That is the difference. That is the power. And perhaps the greatest transformation happens not in your knowledge, but in your mind. When you reclaim your story, you reclaim your confidence. You reclaim your purpose. You reclaim your identity. You reclaim the strength to rise above every challenge because you finally understand that struggle is only part of the story, not the definition of it. You are the descendant of survivors, visionaries, creators, leaders, and innovators. When you embrace this truth, your posture changes, your voice steadies, your goals expand, your life elevates. Reclaiming your story is not merely an act of remembering. It is an act of returning to yourself. It is stepping back into the truth of who you are and stepping away from the illusions that once clouded your vision. It is the moment you decide that your life will no longer be shaped by incomplete narratives. It is the moment you take back your power. And once you reclaim that power, you become unstoppable because nothing is stronger than a person who finally knows themselves. You become a force capable of rewriting not only your own future but the future of generations to come.